Well, now, from video games to film, we are joined by Chris to speak all things about video game adaptations, Back to the Future turning 40, and to see what films you should be seeing in cinemas over the coming weeks. Well, Chris, combining nostalgia and entertainment, video game film adaptations have took storm in cinemas in the past few years. Super Mario movie, Sonic the Hedgehog. I mean, I've got a whole list here. What is the key to making a good video game film?
Well, I was thinking about this in relation to Five Nights at Freddy's, because there's a sequel out. And it's funny you talk about Back to the Future being 40 years, because Five Nights at Freddy's is a very sort of nostalgia, going back to the 80s, very analogue world with an 80s soundtrack. And it's almost like, you know, everything there, even down to the puppets, it feels like it's a video game, but it's the sort of video game that in the 1980s, before we went fully HD and digital, as it would have been seen. So there's something very retro about that. And I think that's part of the appeal in a lot of these films. Even things like Sonic the Hedgehog, there's this, they're accommodating to older members of the audience who might be watching it and thinking, oh, I remember the games that we used to play when we were young, that kind of thing. So it kind of feels that the best video games are the ones that remind us of an age before the video games of today existed, which is kind of ironic. But just go through all of the films, all the video games and the adaptations. They're suffused. Even the Steven Spielberg film that he made a few years ago, which is all about the world of video games. It's all retro and it's all 80s.
Is there any, apart from Five Nights at Freddy's, that stand out to you as being a really good one?
Well, that's a good question, because so many of them, it's like Ghostbusters, a lot of them you see are films that are turned into video games. And I'm not really a gamer, but I know a lot of people who get really excited when these sort of come out. So obviously Super Mario Brothers is the really obvious one, I think.
And then one notable example is Ready Player One, facilitating
one.
Easter eggs and cameos from across pop culture. Does this subtract originality from the film or provide substance to the narrative?
What a brilliant question. Well, that's the Steven Spielberg one I was just thinking of. And it's so interesting because Spielberg, we think of something like Jaws, which is in a way building up the tension, and Ready Player One is this really fast-moving digital world, as you say, with all those Easter eggs in it and that sort of interchangeable world, very digital, very high-tech, but with story at its heart. You see, so in a way, it's unmistakably a Spielberg film, but it's Spielberg making the sort of films that he wasn't really making in the 80s, because you think of all the Indiana Jones films, and you think of all the sort of, obviously he's done war films, Saving Private Ryan, but you think of all the sort of films that we associate him with, and in a way, story is always at the very heart of those. So he brought that to gaming and really said, is it really all that different? Do we want a good story to tell that maybe goes on with different parallel existences and endings and alternate endings? It's a very clever conceit.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, we obviously had the Until Dawn one release, and there's video game films endless amounts. But we'll move on to Back to the Future, as it's the 40th anniversary. And we were just saying that, they went into the future 2015, but that was 10 years ago now.
And do you know what I remember in the second one? You're right, they go forward to 2015.
Yeah.
And it's this world where all the cars are flying in the sky, but they still have analogue newspapers, like literally hard copy newspapers that you read. And of course, at the time, we wouldn't have thought anything of it. But, we have digital newspapers now, but cars are not going in the sky. So it's almost like a flip of what we'd expect. They're brilliant films, aren't they, for showing us the future as seen from the 1980s perspective. And we kind of laugh now because the future is both the same and different in so many ways.
And what were the attitudes towards the film's initial release? Was it instantly popular? Yeah,
because it's also, like we were saying about Spielberg, who's one of the producers in the film, is that it's that whole sense of, where are we going? Can we change our lives? I didn't see the first one at the cinema. I did see the third at the cinema. In more recent years, I've seen them all at the cinema, but all in the wrong order, which is totally fitting because the film jumbles up past, present, and future. But at the time, it felt exciting because it meant that, can we change not just our past, our parents' past, and what about the future? I mean, in a way, it was almost like a video game in a way, and you can all the different films are set in different places.
Fabulous, Chris. Well, very interesting, and we'll be back at 8 p.m. for more news. Bye-bye.